Thank you all for joining us to the Cultural Equity Executive Forum. Before we begin, let us first acknowledge the land on which we operate and present. It is part of the ancient homeland and traditional territories of the Hamanaset, Pagaset, Quinnipiac, and Wapinja people. We pay respect to all of their past, present, and futures, and strive to hold space and value the perspectives that these nations share regarding their history, culture, and traditions. And from that perspective, we also strive to be more conscious and focused stewards of this unceded land and the emergent moment in which we all now reside on the critical clock of climate change. Introducing our very own jazz singer-songwriter, Isabella Mentias.
Desculpe se às vezes ajo assim um pouco tola. É que junto a você meu corpo quase que flutua. E o meu coração quer cantar e dizer: eu só quero você. E meu amigo, eu não abro o coração.
Hello, everyone. Welcome, welcome, welcome. I'm Adriane Jefferson, the Director of Cultural Affairs for the City of New Haven. And it is an honor and a pleasure to be with you today to talk about cultural equity with our Executive Forum leaders. First, we want to thank Isabella Mendez for that beautiful performance. You always deliver and you never let us down when it comes to a performance. So we're really lucky to have had you bless the mic. So today we're talking about cultural equity, right? But what we're really specifically talking about today is ways in which our arts and cultural leaders are embedding cultural equity into their organizations, really creating transformational change, meaningful change. To give it a little context, the Cultural Equity Plan was released in January 2022. Commissioned by the Department of Cultural Affairs, which is the department that I oversee, and also in partnership with a 14-member co-creation group of leaders, artists, activists, freelancers, all throughout the neighborhoods of the city of New Haven, being able to tell us about what cultural equity means for the neighborhoods, being inclusive, being anti-racist, and really redirecting resources to the communities that it belongs to. And so we also work with the Arts Council of Greater New Haven, and we were able to work with our Civic Impact Lab consultants and our Hester Streets consultants. So today, when we're talking about cultural equity, what we're really talking about is a way that we can amplify the arts and culture that's here in a way in which everyone can activate and be involved in this ecosystem of rich arts and culture in a really inclusive way. Hearing voices that we've never heard before, centering voices and sharing power like we've never done before, right? Being transformative in every way possible and being unapologetically radical. That is what today is about. And so we are going to hear again from some of our arts and cultural leaders. I'm very excited. Some of them are really close friends of mine. And we're going to dive in and we're going to talk about what it takes to actually do cultural equity work. So the first person we're going to bring in is Shelly Criela, Executive Director of the International Festival of Arts and Ideas. Hi, Shelly.
Hi, Adriane. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. Pretty good. It's always a pleasure to see you.
Likewise.
Like I said, you're always a breath of fresh air, so vibrant and energetic, and I love what you bring to the table.
Thank you. Thank you. I have my window open, so if you hear a little vibrant and energetic thunder clapping, that's where it's coming from.
Same.
It's not me trying to make a point.
And I'm in a hot attic right now, so, you know. But the first question that I wanted to ask you, and actually we're going to ask this of all of our panelists. The first question is, what is cultural equity to you?
Yeah, so thank you. Thanks for that question, and thanks for this work and this opportunity to speak with colleagues and to speak with the community. Because I had a little heads up that this question was coming, I know what I think, and then I like to do a little research. So I'm going to take you through my journey. I looked it up. I said, okay, well, what does the internet tell me cultural equity is? Mm-hmm. I want to see what that says. And what I got to was a lot of similar language around it being an expression of policies and practices that all people, and especially those who've been historically marginalized, mm-hmm. Including and especially, that those folks are represented, empowered, resourced, and supported in the development of arts policy. Actually, mostly what I saw was represented, and I added the other words. I added, okay, yeah, represented is great, but how about also empowered, resourced, and supported? Because that's often where I see the work fall down, is to stop at representation. And I think the intention of that sentence is to be about fully represented, which means fully supported, fully empowered. But I think we have to articulate it. And then I kind of dug into what does that require? What does it require? What does that definition require of us? And I think it's important and cannot be separated that it requires us to acknowledge that the allocation of resources and the value of quality that's been placed on work has been unevenly applied. Mm-hmm. That we have not started, we're not coming from a place of equity. We're coming from a place of inequity historically. When you talk about, the way arts and culture is supported and funded and resourced and celebrated and valued in the United States and even globally, because of white supremacy culture. And so if we have to start there and acknowledge that in order to really live the definition.
I think that's a perfect segue into bringing in Jacob Petrone, Artistic Director of the Long Wharf Theater.
Hi.
Hi, Jacob.
Hello, hello.
How are you feeling?
You know, it's Monday. It was a
It is.
busy Monday. This is like my 7th meeting, I think.
Yes, I saw you
you know
earlier.
how it is. But it's nice to see. It's nice to see both of you. It's always a joy and a privilege to be in space with both of you. So,
Well, Jacob, I'm going to ask you the same question. Cultural equity. What does that mean to you?
so I did not do, what Shelly. I did not do
Shelly went above and beyond. It's
little
okay.
research. I know, Shelly, A plus student for you. But I did, because Adriane did ask us to think about this. And the word that I wrote down here in my journal is, when I think about cultural equity, I think about access. I think about access. I think that access really sits at the center of our analysis around cultural equity. And then I was thinking about something that my mentor, Oscar Eustis, used to say to me all the time at the Public Theater in New York City. He used to say, culture belongs to everyone. So this idea, right, that access, that accessibility to our stories, to our experiences, to our reflections in our cultural spaces belongs to everyone. And so that's sort of that's what I think about when I think about cultural equity. That's what I think about.
Culture belongs to everyone. We're going to unpack that a little bit later on when we get the rest of the panelists in. With that said, we're going to bring on Rebecca Moore, Program Director of the Arts Council of Greater New Haven. Hi, Beck. How are you?
Let me in. I'm ready.
You're always ready. You don't got to get ready because you're always ready.
Stay ready so you don't have to be ready.
Same question to you, Beck. Same question. Cultural equity. What does that mean to you?
An equal playing field for all. We see a lot of times where it's like, oh, a friend of my dad got me into this position, or, I know somebody that knows somebody. And other people don't have that same opportunity. Other people are starting their businesses and, working on their art from the ground up. These are first generation college graduates that we're talking about, or even first generation entrepreneurs, those that are going the technology route. So how are they able to grab on that friend, or I know this person or that person, when they're the first to do it in their families? So an equal playing field definitely for all.
All right, we're going to bring on Lisa Dent, Executive Director of Art Space. Hi, Lisa.
Hi.
Hi, how are you?
I'm well. How are all of you?
We're doing good. We determined it's a Monday, it's raining, and I'm hot in the attic. Yes.
Yeah.
We're doing really good.
It's been a lot today. I think that the weather has affected the vibrations all kinds of ways today. So I'm here as well as I can be. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being with us. So same question, cultural equity.
Yeah.
What does it mean to you?
Okay, so I confess I did what Shelly did. But I'm from a long line of teachers, so forgive me. What I was struck by was that equity wasn't the word I was kind of getting kind of caught up with. It was cultural. So and what we're really talking about are these social norms, these ideas, these ways that we engage, and then how do we do that in public space through institutions? Because institutions are corporate entities. They have a set of laws and rules, and we currently have to navigate them in order to provide cultural expression in the way that we do it through the arts. And so how do we do that, and how do we prepare everyone in the best way we can to be able to do that?
And I can see why the word that we all get hung up on is culture, because there's so many different definitions to what culture is and what it can be, right? And so we're going to also unpack that, ways in which we view culture through an anti-racist, anti-biased perspective and approach. So thank you, Lisa, for your answer. And last but not least, we're going to bring on Anthony McDonald, Executive Director of the Schubert Theater.
Hello, everybody. How are you?
Doing well. Hi, Anthony. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good. I made it home.
We are glad for that. Anthony has to drive. Where do you drive to? I don't want to tell your story. Where do you drive to?
It's about a 45-minute drive. 'cause I'm right now I'm in Stanford, but I'm looking forward to hopefully changing that up very soon and making my way to New Haven.
Okay, well, we are glad that you are safe and that you made it in a record time of 40 minutes. I think it was more like 35 minutes, though.
Who's counting?
So, same question to you, Anthony. Cultural equity, what does that mean to you?
To me, as a Schubert Theater, we have the opportunity to, in many ways, curate so many different kinds of programming.
Mm-hmm.
And in that sense, we're in a unique position that if we are not representing our full community around us, which we are blessed to be in New Haven, then we are doing something wrong. And the Schubert has not always presented a lot of diverse programming from all different kinds of culture. And so cultural equity to me means finally leveling that playing field where in our season, you get to experience different cultures that are in our community on the stage to where you can see, once again, where you come from. You can see stories about your people, whether that is from Puerto Ricans to Ecuadorians to Mexicans to African Americans to Jamaicans to Italians and Irish in between. The culture is on that stage represented to where you can actually have access to that throughout the entire season, not just one time, maybe twice if you're lucky. That's not enough. So cultural equity to me means that throughout a season, you can see the full body and representation of different cultures that are amongst us in our community.
So I actually heard a few things there. I heard cultural preservation, right, of stories, particularly Black and Brown and other historically underrepresented narratives, right? I also heard healing and reconciliation. You didn't say those words exactly, but that is what I'm hearing. Hearing the ability to remedy the wrongs that have been done and to identify those wrongs in order to actually move forward in an equitable way. Okay, so we're going to unpack that a little bit later as well. So let's continue. Let's jump right in because I know y'all have so much to share. I first want to preface this with the reason that we selected you all to be here as panelists is because we believe that you are doing the work. You are starting to be or on a path to be or already are anti-racist, anti-biased arts and cultural organizations who took the anti-racism pledge that we released in 2020, right? And so we want to acknowledge the fact that y'all have taken the stride and have really been the ones to step up and say, we are going to turn our arts and cultural organizations into an anti-racist, anti-biased platform. Okay. So with that said, my first question, and actually I'm going to ask Jacob, I'm going to ask you to go first. My first deep dive question. What does anti-racism and cultural equity leadership look like to you? And what does the path to cultural equity look like going forward for your arts and cultural institution?
Ooh, this is a tough one. I mean, there's so many layers, I think, to this question. But I think, when in terms of centering cultural equity and anti-racism in leadership, the thing that I wrote down here is that it's not something that you say, it's something that you do. It is in many ways, it's a lifelong practice. And that you are always deepening your analysis of how to center those values in your work as a leader and with your staff and with your board and with your constituents. The other thing that I think, when you are centering anti-racism as a core part of your leadership, I also think that it's there. You have to be unafraid to say that I don't know. One of the things that I say to my students at Yale all the time is that one of the most powerful things that you can do as a leader is to say, I don't know. And I think that the ability, the humility, right, and the ability to say that I don't walk in front of you, I don't walk behind you, I walk next to you.
That's right.
I don't have all the answers, you don't have all the answers, but when we come together in community, we will find the answers. And I think that is also part of what it means to center this kind of leadership in our work, when anti-racism and anti-oppression and inclusivity really sit at the center of our analysis. And then in terms of the organization piece, like how to actually move your organization to becoming anti-racism, it's about really assessing your culture. What is your organizational culture? And the work of shifting culture, my friends, is also lifelong work. You are always moving into the culture that you want to have, because shifting culture is really hard work, because it's about working with a constellation of humans that make up your organization. And we're all going to be at different parts on our journey.
Mhm.
The other thing that I'm thinking about in terms of how to center this work relative to your organization is something that I learned as an organizer with the People's Institute for Survival and Beyond. And one of the things that they say, and I love it, and I try to think about it all the time, is we have to be critical lovers of our institutions. We can love our institutions and we can be critical of them. We can hold that idea side by side. Because if we are not critical lovers of our institutions, it's so easy to then get complacent, to think that there isn't more work to do. There is always work to do. And that when you center anti-racism, anti-oppression, again, it's going to be an ongoing journey. And that's part of it, right? That it is ongoing. So those are just some reflections as I think about that question.
Okay. We're going to bring in Shelly. Same question. What does cultural equity and anti-racist, anti-bias leadership look like for you?
So, when I first read this question, I immediately thought of listening to Babs Rawls-Ivy this morning. I was listening to her radio show, and she was talking about her frustration with the resistance to critical race theory. And she was like, it's not critical race theory, it's history. Like, learn your history. And it just resonated so much with me. And I think that, this kind of ties into what Jacob was saying about it's a journey, not a destination, and you don't know everything. It's leadership in cultural equity looks like a commitment to learning, constant learning, and learning not just from the sources that I was given as a young person. I'm going to speak in the I a little bit here, but to really seek out places that I didn't get wisdom from as I was growing up, and be intentional about ensuring that I'm humble enough and open enough to lean into that wisdom and to let that wisdom lead me. I also, believe very deeply in what Anthony spoke to in terms of representation. And I know I said it's not just about representation. It isn't. And all of the folks, that work within a cultural institution, being a critical lover of institutions, must reflect the community in which they exist and serve. That's so critical. I think that's one of the things that's incumbent on leadership. Like, that is the thing you actually have control over as a leader. And so that's really critical. And, I would say specifically for the festival, because I think the way that racial equity and cultural equity show up, it's so different. Even within arts organizations, there are similarities, but it shows up differently in every institution because of the way that we work. And as a festival that's been defined as an international festival,
right?
I really feel like the festival has to fight against this lens of colonialism in the work that we do. Like, it's international can't just mean if you're from Scotland or Europe or Western Europe or Australia or Canada, you're international and you have high quality work. Like, this is a big globe. And there are a lot of folks that live right in New Haven that are from other countries besides the US that have cultural expressions that are really important to center. So in and of, the context of the festival, I think really addressing what does international mean, and how can we, within the context of that word, be intentionally anti-racist?
So I'm gonna allow everyone to answer that question. But Shelly, I wanted to ask you, especially as a white woman who is, you're really clear about your anti-racism work. You've always been clear in who you are. I'm curious about your journey into anti-racism, your personal journey, and why you felt it was important, and how you started to embed yourself into the culture and into the community.
That's decades work, right? I'm in my 40s, full disclosure. So I came of age at a time when I lived in a suburb of Milwaukee. I'm sorry, I'm going in the Wayback Machine because that's where it starts. And there was a desegregation busing program that my school participated in. And from the age of 7, I lived in this world of both representation and also isolation, racial isolation between communities. And it was very troubling. Like, I remember being quite distraught about losing friends or seeing racism act out amongst people that were, with me. And So I think that experience really created a foundation of just like, this is not how it's supposed to be. You know, like there was something in me that was like, this isn't, I don't like this. I want to do something about this. And then as a lover of the arts, I think at some point I was just able to combine those worlds. My ex-husband is Cuban and I speak Spanish. And so being with him too and learning from his experiences, I didn't know everything. I screwed up all the time, expecting things of him, expecting things, you know, of my family that didn't meet my expectations. And I think because I had a constant like desire to make things better and a constant spirit of inquiry, I just keep going and I will never be done. Not ever, 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 ever. So I'm super grateful actually to people. I'm surprised and grateful that people still invite me to parties and let me in. Like that's, thank you.
You were often the life of the party, so no wonder we all let you in. No, but I think the reason I asked that question is not to call you out. It's nothing like that. It's more about cultural equity being an ecosystem issue, right? It's something that all of us have to be a part of. It's something that all of us have a stake in. And it doesn't matter your background or your demographic information. We can all do the work of cultural equity. On that note, I want to bring up Lisa. Lisa, same question for you around cultural equity leadership and what it looks like for you, what it means for you through the lens of art space. I think you're muted, Lisa.
Oh, okay. Yeah, there I am. It's ebbed and flowed, I think, in the way things do when you're learning and you're a lifelong learner. But I remember I wrote once for an essay, you know, when they were talking about third wave feminism, for instance, I said, you know, I'm more interested in low tide. I'm interested in where things, you know, are balanced and equitable along the place. And that was 30 years ago when I wrote that, right? And I looked back on it recently and realized that I knew what I wanted then, but I didn't understand the mechanisms by which I needed to work in the world, and then how my understanding of racism would need to be challenged within that, right? And so when I came to art space, I was less concerned, quite frankly, about, you know, having a long list of only Black artists, because I've seen for 2 decades these lists of artists and exhibitions and performances that didn't address the great inequity in the institutions themselves. So what I was really interested in was who was walking into the space, who felt like the space was theirs, who felt like a stakeholder in art space. And that was where I saw the deep inequity in relationship to the city that I was working in. And so I just felt like for art space, that was the work. The work was to use social justice, those words that keep coming out, is just saying the social justice for me is to have people come in and be welcoming and smile at them, because that is not what was happening in the city. So sometimes cultural equity and these ideas, I find, can be very simple as well as extremely complex. And so I tend to want to address it with art space right now in terms of real institutional structural change. And frankly, I think that the size of our institution allows for those conversations to happen more readily and more deliberately and more quickly than I think a lot of larger visual arts institutions in particular.
Do you think that we get too caught up on the jargon of the way anti-racism sounds? So like buzzwords, you know, using words like transformation or using words like DEI and justice. Do you feel like we just throw these words around and that they really have no substance if it's not met with action?
I don't know if I said that, but that's right. I mean, that's how I feel. Because, you know, I'm a 52-year-old woman, and I feel like I get language policed a lot, right? That this terms change. And any training that I've been in, I find myself sort of pushed into this group of, the older people who don't get it. And I'm, it's a language barrier. It's not an understanding of the economic and capitalist structures and that we work within, and an understanding of how mass incarceration has deeply impacted the Black community. But in the office one day, I used a term in terms of a meeting that is now out of favor. And so, is that the reason that I shouldn't be in leadership? No, we're all learning. And as long as I can take in that learning, then and bring it to an institutional level, to think more deeply about how we function as an institution, that is the work. Racism is not a feeling, it's not a word, it is an institutional structure.
Well, on that note, I want to bring in Rebecca. And Rebecca, you come from a very different lens, right? You are from New Haven. You're a podcaster before you were the program manager for the Arts Council. And I believe you bring a very unique perspective of community and what it means to really be involved in community. So I know I asked that other question, but I actually want to direct another question to you, if that's okay.
Absolutely.
I want to talk about safe spaces. How do we, as arts and cultural institutions and organizations and stakeholders, how do we create safe spaces of belonging for Black and Brown people and other marginalized groups?
Thank you for that question. I've been writing my notes down with everybody's speaking, so many great things. And one thing I wrote down is representation and relationship. So we have these organizations, right, that are predominantly white. There's a certain culture within these organizations that we're trying to dismantle, right? We can't just go in and say, okay, well, great, look, we had an art show. Y'all should come in. Like, we're here. We're doing it for you. This is cultural equity. I always say, like, don't make it a hot word. We got to actually do this thing. You have to build relationships with the people that you are trying to help and service. So going into a space with no intentions, not going into the space, not saying, listen, I have this for you. Look, I'm doing the job, right? I'm doing the work, right? Going into spaces, being silent and listening and observing and building those relationships with the community. In this space, I just started in January, and my first thing was like, listen, we need to be in these streets. Let's go to Louisville. Let's go to Fair Haven, because Arts Council has been around since 1964. I just knew about it in 2018 because of you and because of Dan. Shout out to Dan. I miss him so much.
Yes, shout out to Daniel.
You guys really were doing the work then for us people like me, who, like you said, I don't have a nonprofit background. I went to school for psychology. I was a podcaster. That is how I've been able to be in this space. That's proof right there in the pudding, right? Yeah. I'm representing what cultural equity is. And really listening to the community and what it is that they need, and not going with a handout. I think that's really, really, really key to changing the narrative and building that relationship so that they trust you, so that when there is a show at Art Space or at the Schubert, people are more willing to not only sit in those seats, but also see themselves working in those same places, also see themselves on the boards of those same places. It's more than just the outside appearance, is the back end too. Like, who's the stage manager? Giving our kids those opportunities to do those things, because with culture is ageism too with it, right? It's a big age difference and gap within our institutions and our culture. Having a high school student on the board, having a junior board, letting them see those things. These are things and stuff that many people from the city have never seen before. You hear about the nonprofits, but you don't know the real grit in it, and the boards and the meetings, and saying that you're a college student on the board for the Arts Council of Greater New Haven, that's huge. Giving that person that opportunity to build their resume like that, that's vital. Those are the vital things. And like I said, building relationships in the communities and letting them see you, and not only saying that you're doing the work, but letting them see that, oh, okay, yeah, they mean business, because people really, they know when it's real and when it's not.
And so I want to actually stop you there, because for those who are watching, I hope you're taking notes. I really do want you to write down Go into the community without an agenda. That's what Beck is saying. Embed yourself into the community, embed yourself into the culture. You know, if you want to get to know what someone's culture actually is, the best way is to be a part of it without any type of hidden agenda, like Beck is saying.
Yep.
On that note, I would like to bring up Anthony. I want to talk a little bit more about safe spaces. How are you making the Schubert Theater a safe space for Black and Brown artists and community members all throughout New Haven?
Ooh, that's a good question. You know, when Rebecca was talking, I was thinking a lot about how I'm trying, because it's an ongoing process, but trying to do a lot of what she was saying, because it isn't just, you know, I've said a few times publicly that just because, you know, my face now is the highest face in the Schubert Theater doesn't mean that we've all of a sudden now crossed some new bridge, i.e. America didn't stop being racist because Obama became the president. We all knew that there were still so many problems left to fix, to work on, to try to solve, to try to get anywhere near solving it. And so for me, it is about that internal part, about what do we look like as an institution on the inside, as a staff, you know, my volunteers, you know, do we look like we represent the community, or is it just all one thing? You know, once we kind of begin to work on that, which is something that I've been doing, because I'm probably the only person here who has such a drastic shift in the company when I started. You know, we have about 15 people on my staff, and by the time I walked in the door last year, there was only 4 people left. And so I was given, one could say, an opportunity to hire a brand new team around me. And then 2 of those original 4 still left after that. So I have basically 2 people, maybe now 4 people, because I've hired a couple people from the past or from pre-pandemic times, and, you know, back onto the team. And so during my process, I said openly to the board, to my CEO, that the goal at the end of the day is to still have the best institution, but this institution has to look like the community that we are serving. And at this point, it was up to nobody else but myself. So if we didn't, after everything was said and done, then sadly there would only be me to blame, because I didn't have anyone telling me who I can and who I can't hire. It was just for me to find those people. And like I said, it wasn't just then about just trying to hire somebody Black because they're Black or Latino, but it was still about who's the best person for the job, because I don't want to bring somebody into a place and set them up for failure, because I'm still then doing a disservice then to that person. And so what I had to end up doing, which I had a recruiter help me out, but I told that person that I don't bring me 5-6 people and everybody's white, full stop. Just don't do that. We exist. I exist. So that means there's people like me. Find us and make sure that they're in the mix at every single position that I'm looking for. In turn, it's up to me then to make sure that, like I said, I'm either finding a quality person who happens to be, and then hopefully providing them the opportunity to do what they have to do that at the institution. What I do at my company, I try to make sure that everybody feels like they have a voice. And not try, I tell them, if you got an idea, bring it up. I don't know everything. You know, I was just telling this to my new director of marketing today. I didn't go to school to be a person in the marketing field. I will have my opinions, but I'm coming to you as the expert, as the professional in this environment that I've hired to do a job for me. So I'm going to talk to you. I'm going to bring ideas to you, but everybody else is also able to do the same thing. So but that's the point though. It is hard to kind of say that I'm making this a safe space, and I know safe space because I've done X, Y, Z. At the end of the day, it is incumbent upon my team and I to do it by making sure that we are welcoming people, making sure that I'm inviting people, making sure that we're working with different folks who know other communities, other cultural communities within our world, and making sure that those people are getting the invitation to come and see our shows, whether it is, Bad Blood, but whether it's for an American in Paris, like we're doing this weekend, or as if it was the Platters, Coasters, and Drifters last week, or the NAACP Freedom Fund that we had also had last week. The idea is we have to make sure that we are inviting everyone to everything that we're doing, so that people at the end of the day don't just think that I want to talk to them once it's a Black show, whatever that means. And now I talk to the Black community because I know you're gonna love this, but then it's American in Paris, not an inherently diverse show. But I'm gonna say, you don't want this. Hey, white people, you're gonna love this show. We can't do that. We got to stop that kind of train of that thinking, that process, because that's how we don't make it safe. That's how we don't invite folks to want to believe me when I say there are some amazing things happening behind these doors. Whether it is from this to that, I'm providing quality entertainment and hopefully creating an environment that you're going to feel comfortable in. That when you get here, you're going to see smiling faces, as Lisa said earlier, that are going to be welcoming and wanting you to come into this space. And if and when that's not happening, then I want to know about it. Tell me. Believe me, I get a lot of phone calls and voicemails for other people in my institution, because the people of this community, when they have a problem, they find my number and they leave me voicemail. So it's the same thing for everybody else. If there's things that are happening in my theater that I'm not privy to at first, but it's a problem, then I want to solve it. I don't want to just hear that, or make anyone believe that they just don't have a voice in the Schubert Theater. So it's
Anthony, I want to stay there for a little while and open up a question for the rest of the group, because the one thing that you touched on that I think is so important is around the internal culture, such as the people we hire, right? The people on our boards, bringing more seats to the table, giving more opportunities for the staff and the employees really to be a reflection of the community whom we serve, right? Mm-hmm. So what I want to talk about is oppressive work culture. And I want to talk about like anti-oppressive work culture and the work that y'all have been doing around this, because, it's one thing to have an opportunity and place, a whole bunch of artists of color into positions, but it's difficult if the arts organization is not ready for them, meaning they haven't done the work to make sure that this is going to be a safe space, a space of belonging, and an anti-oppressive work situation, right? I think that's very important. So I would like to stay there. Jacob, curious your thoughts on anti-oppressive work culture and the work that you've been doing around this.
Sure. I mean, I think I do think that in arts and culture space, I think that it's a complicated issue. It's a systemic issue, because I think, to your point, Adriane, it's not enough to just bring people of color into your organizations. The question you have to ask yourself is, have you created the conditions within your organization for people of color to be seen, to be valued, and to be successful? And that also is, in some ways, lifelong work, as well. And just going back, Adriane, though, because I think it's connected to this question about like, what does, healing and reconciliation look like? How do you create healing spaces? I think the thing that we also have to do is we have to name the kind of spaces that we want to create in our organizations. We have to just say it. We are a space for accountability. We are a space for reflection. When harm happens, because harm is inevitably going to happen, what are our accountability practices? What is the space for a repair process? Because I think so often when we talk about accountability, is that sometimes I think we point the finger in this direction, when in fact we have to point the finger in our direction. How am I going to show up differently? How am I going to learn? How am I going to respond to this? And so naming the culture that you actually want to create within your institution, I think, is the first step. And then actually building a process with your staff about, okay, how are we going to live? How are we going to live into this culture? So one of the things that we've done at Long Wharf Theater is we created an accountability working group made up of representatives from across the organization, where we come together every other week and we talk about the culture that we are actively trying to build at Long Wharf Theater. And what's coming out of this process is we are writing a manifesto as a kind of invitation to engage. Come with us on this journey to building the kind of culture that we want at Long Wharf Theater. And it's to our staff, it's to our artists, it's to our board, it's to everyone who kind of encounters, right? It's to capture the values and the ethos of what we want it to feel like when you come to Long Wharf Theater. So I think name the culture that you actually want to build, and then take active steps and create an accountability process. And a lot of this, I have to shout out Hope Chavez. Hope was who I know was a part of your the cultural equity plan. I know that she was part of that working group, but Hope brought a lot of ideas and a lot of expertise and a lot of wisdom around this to Longworth Theater. So the ripples of that wisdom are being felt, I think, across the organization. And one of the great things is that Hope said, I hope I'm getting this right, but around conflict and around how we build culture, she said, just because there's conflict does not mean that harm has happened. And I love that, because I think sometimes what happens is that we are so afraid to have difficult conversations. We are so afraid to engage in moments of feedback. And I think that if we can remember that we are all learning and growing together, that we move away from a spirit of self-righteousness to a spirit of self-reflection. And I think that is also, really key, I think, to our work and to the cultures that we're trying to build. So, yeah.
Yes. And yes, Jacob. I think we're all like shaking our heads because we agree with you. Part of this work is being uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
It's really interesting to me when people say they want to do the work, but then they run at any type of hint of uncomfortability on their end. So the fact that you're naming that is so, so important to this conversation. Lisa, I want to bring you into the conversation around anti-oppressive work culture. We had a conversation earlier around power mapping and around like really mapping out this issue around accountability on both sides, right? Like preparing our artists for the workforce, right? Specifically our Black and Brown artists who have not had the same resources in most of the cases, and preparing them for a really great sustainable career with a larger arts and cultural institution or entity. But then also this piece around preparing the arts and cultural institutions to be accountable as well, and to create this anti-oppressive workspace. So if you want to jump in on that, that would be great.
Yeah, I was really I've been struck by that conflict since I've been at ArtSpace in the middle of a global pandemic, where we need to invite our very small staff to work in a way that is safe for them and that is equitable and is providing our audiences the information they need, and understanding that when and where staff are unable or unwilling to do that, right? And to try and be there and have those difficult conversations. But remember that, part of all of us are also working with another body, which is the board. And my power is very different than I think almost all of us on this call, in terms of the relationship the board has with me, and in terms of their, trust in my understanding about how this institution can function as a corporate entity and be anti-racist and at least make these attempts, right? And so much good can happen on the staff level, and we can work on that. But nonprofit organizations are looking to their board and have their board, and particularly for me, my engagement with ArtSpace, I have no power. I'm not on the board. There are different ways that I engage, that I have to engage because of my position that I was not given, right? So I'm in conversation, like, how do we discuss that? Because those at that level, the board level, we're having conversations around, our financial resources and the programming that is coming up, and the legal entities that we're partnering with, and what it means to partner in public space, and what is public safety, right? Like, these are all things that don't generally get talked about at our staff level, right? We talk about them logistically, and we talk about them sort of quickly and running through, because we have a smaller staff and we have programming that we need to have in order to serve our community, but also to serve the artists that we bring in. But I don't have the power to currently really institute those kinds of changes that others are afforded to in their institutions. So until those kinds of things are alleviated, right, I think there will be a significant, well understood change, right? We're not talking about, flipping it completely and everyone's sort of scared and wondering what happened and what's going on. I'm sort of talking about engaging at all levels. And for us, it means on a very daily, on a small basis. And I also just wanted to mention that, visual artists and the work is generally silent. And so when a lot of the work is happening in the performing arts, you're coming together and you're creating something and there's community there. That does not happen in visual art spaces at all, right? So a lot of the work is also helping visual artists understand what it means to bring your artwork to public space in a way that is very different than in the performing arts.
Can I just jump in really fast, Adriane?
Yes, of course, please.
Because I really am so grateful, Lisa, for you naming the complexity and the importance of alignment between the staff and the board. That in order for you to kind of advance the organization and for the organization to be able to center the values that we say we care about, that the board, right, that the board has to support that process and that the board has to give space to the executive leader to do their work. And so one of the things that we did, that Shelley and I did, was we said, there's learning here. There's learning between our two boards. Our organizations are very aligned. And that board culture, having a really healthy board culture and how a board can support their leaders. So we brought our boards together for a conversation, because I think the importance of partnership and learning and growing together and sharing wisdom. And so I wonder if that's, if that may be an opportunity for us in supporting you with ArtSpace and with your board. Because I'm really grateful that you're naming that challenge, because it is a challenge that we don't always talk about because it's so complex. But I think in order for us to truly do cultural equity, and for us to be a fully a thriving cultural ecosystem here in New Haven, we need our board's support, and we need them to allow us to do our work. And I feel very, very blessed that my board does that for me and for Kid at Longworth Theater. So just an offering.
That's definitely, I was going to add to, or lets us do our work, lets us, because we're the ones that know what artists want and what the community want. We're right there. We're face to face with those people. So your board trusting you to say, listen, this is what we're getting from community. What are we going to do to get it done is vital. I had also wrote down when Shelley was talking about when did the work start, as far as, learning, and you were intentional and you were able, like you said, I didn't have it all, but you were willing to get that feedback. Our boards have to be willing to get that feedback. Us as staff have to be willing to get that feedback and not be defensive or, oh, we did this. What do you mean? That's going to cut off the relationship right then and there. Like being open and willing to listen. You have to get that feedback and listen. So then that way you can move forward. Once you're in a state of learning, all right, we're going to have this program. It didn't go all that well. Do those feedback surveys. Like, what could we have done better? You take that, you actually use that, and you actually work on continually learning and continually being better. You have to. So,
well, on that note, I want to ask a little bit around this idea of shared power. What does that look like? Shelley and Anthony, I'm curious what shared power or any type of shared power model you have adopted at your organizations. And when I say shared power model, I'm talking about from a board level to an executive leadership level to a staff level to a community level. What are ways you're intersecting with the community to work with them together on what culture is in your organization, what programming is, what initiatives you decide to take up?
Shelley, you want to go first?
No, go ahead. Go ahead. You go.
It's, obviously you asked about a few different levels. From the board perspective, it's definitely a conversation, thankfully, that I have with my board. Um, there are definitely some board members on my board who are definitely a little more vocal than others. And so, but then also, while they may be vocal, they are also very big supporters of what we're doing, and they show up. And so knowing that when they show up is sometimes half the battle, because it's for me then in my position, I know that it's coming from a place of, I want to say love is the first word that came to my mind. When they're showing up to make sure that I know that what we're doing at the theater matters, and it matters to them, and it matters that they're on the board itself, so that they are proud to be in the house, to show their face, to bring people with them. So it's important in that way. And so thankfully with the board at the Schubert and I, we definitely talk about that. But then they also, as kind of even Jacob was saying earlier, they allow me that space to do my part, to do my job. I don't necessarily feel like they are ever trying to micromanage me on my day-to-day aspect of running this institution. It was 6 months to get in this spot from the moment I sent in that application. And so I was talking to some folks this past week about it. We spoke about 6 or 7 times before they really decided upon me. So I like to believe that they were convinced enough that this person, this guy, was going to be able to kind of bring the institution in the right direction into the future. And so I feel personally that, I have that kind of just backing from them. But even when it comes to then, they say the community aspect, not to say skip over the staff, but to get to the community part, it's something small, but it's something that I feel we as leaders in this of institutions like ours have to sometimes take into consideration, is just that we send out now literally reviews / asking the public that are coming to our shows, what did you think? Did you have any problems? What kind of programming would you like to see in the future? We're asking people their thoughts on what we're doing in that theater, because I do read them. I go through the 100 plus, sometimes 200 plus kind of this thoughts from the public that came and supported us, to make sure that we're hopefully getting it right, to understand that if they want to see more of X, that we take that in consideration as we look at our next programming year, or even in the same year. So it's trying to make sure that they may not know they have a voice in my head, but the public does, because at the end of the day, I don't program for Anthony McDonald. Like, people may not like what I want to see at the time. And that's the whole point. It's not about me. It's about this community and what they want to see. And for me, it's just me trying to get it right for them. So it's a conversation that we probably don't have as openly as we could, where we can start having some more kind of, town halls, and just bringing folks into the building. We do some free events, which is nice, but I definitely think that there are definitely more opportunities for us in the future, just to make sure the community is invited in the door and to give us their feedback face to face, which, as Jacob knows, it's not always the most fun to have those face-to-face dialogues, but it also, once, as we said earlier, conflict is not always such a bad thing. Sometimes it's nice to really hear what the people have to say. And sometimes there's kernels of greatness in their thoughts that can help us grow and be better. It's not just, none of us are all knowing beings and bodies of people that we just know everything that's right in the sort. We sometimes have to go to the people and ask them their thoughts, and hopefully we can learn and grow with that. And then for me, at the end of the day, the staff, it's about having that open door. I tell my staff that knock on the door and come on in. And you got something to say, come talk to me about it. I don't like this whole closed door policy or gatekeeper thing. I don't even have an assistant in the first place, or a gatekeeper. So it's like, if you got something to say to me, just come on through. I'm right here for you. So yeah, that's kind of what I'm doing here. And
no, that's great. And what was coming to my mind, and actually I could say something about each of your organizations and things that you have done. But one thing that comes to my mind, Anthony, with cultural equity and the way in which you are aligning the work at the Schubert Theater to the cultural equity plan is actually before we even released the plan, right? You opened up the Schubert Theater as a vaccination site. For the first time ever, right? And so now looking at community and how we invite folks in a totally different perspective than what has been done before. So I think that's just, I wanted to highlight that because I think it's a really good example of ways in which you all are thinking differently about the work that you're doing. Shelly, I want to bring you into the conversation. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, thank you. So I got the chance to think while Anthony was talking and organize my thoughts. Thanks, Anthony. I think transparency, is really key. And that's another, like, nothing is a destination. It's always a journey. There's certainly things that we need to be more transparent about at the Festival and Arts and Ideas that we're not yet, in part because we're still, building practices as a newer team. But two of the things that we have done is we benchmarked wages. That was one of the first things I wanted to do when I started, was do like a wage analysis and benchmark wages and then make those bands transparent across the organization so that people weren't wondering, like, am I being paid fairly? Am I being discriminated against from a wage perspective? And they were not, like in a previous organization I worked in, those were kind of market driven. So if you worked in a certain position, you might get paid more, even if your title was the same level. And we didn't do that intentionally at the festival. We made them all the bands are the same. And then posted those on job descriptions. And this is something that lots of arts organizations, were not alone in doing that, but it's just an example, I think, of transparency as a mechanism for power sharing. Because when you know what you're going to make if you do a job, that gives you the power to make a choice, and how to use your time. And I think that's really key. And budget transparency is the other thing. Like, I want to get us further even to the point of I want everyone to know the budget. I want everyone to know what we're spending on everything. I want everyone to have an opinion, and so that there's some shared knowledge. And that's an opportunity for professional development. I mean, I really grew a lot when I started getting involved in budget meetings at my last job, and I really appreciated it. I feel that power sharing of, like, co-curation or power sharing comes when you pay people for their time and their labor, and you give them resources to do their job. So I believe in paid work. We do have volunteers that volunteer, like, to help with the festival, but we don't have volunteers that support, that help curate neighborhood festivals out of the goodness of their heart. That's work. And so one of the things that we started doing when I started was to offer, it's not enough yet, but to at least start offering stipends to those community members, because they're bringing an expertise, and that expertise should be compensated. And then being transparent about, I don't know if this was happening before, but being transparent about the budget, the full budget, and saying, here are the resources. How would you suggest they get allocated? Here are some things that, we might need to spend, and just really having that open conversation about, because a lot of times that power gets hoarded through money. And the more we can be open, I think, about money, it helps. It doesn't hurt. Like, I don't want to make all the decisions. That's not a fun thing to do. It's much more liberating to share the wealth and share the resources. So those are some of the ways that we've done it at the festival. And listen, I wasn't born knowing that. I wasn't raised in it. I figured it out by trial and error at my last job. God bless them for putting up with me for so long.
So Shelly, so for those who are interested in knowing more about the budget, can they find that online on the website for Arts and Ideas? How do they tap into budget conversations with you?
So right now we have the annual report is the most transparent, like, external facing document that we have. We have our internal budgets for program managers. So for example, like, the community program manager has a budget for the programs that she does for the year. Those are much more detailed, but for, like, a really broad understanding, the annual report's on the website.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. I just want to, again, for those taking notes, I will be kind of shouting some things out that I think you should write down. And actually, I'm going to go a little bit back. I think it was under Anthony mentioned something around not wanting to be a gatekeeper, right? So writing down thoughts around, and asking yourselves, and there's questions in this cultural equity plan as well. You know, what are ways in which you are being a gatekeeper? And I personally believe that you can be a gatekeeper that opens doors instead of shuts them, because we all are gatekeepers to one degree or another, right? So it's about acknowledging that and then talking about how you want to use your power to amplify and provide a platform for other people. But definitely write down the concept around gatekeeping. Another thing, something that Shelly just said, pay the community in whose advice you seek, right? We will pay a consultant $100,000, but we won't pay community what they are worth. And we go to them for free advice. We need to stop that. And really, please write that down. Stop not paying community members and going to them for free advice. So I'm looking at the time, and y'all know I have so many more questions, but I really want to get to, we just don't have enough time for all the questions. So I want to go into challenges, because I think, you know, I would be remiss for us to sit up here and talk about doing work that's deep and meaningful and transformative without talking about the fact that many challenges come with this, especially when you're the ones leading the way for your organization. So Jacob, I want to bring you to the table to talk to you just about what challenges have you faced in doing this work? And it can be from challenges in the past or recent challenges.
Yeah, happy to share. But I'm just looking at our chat. It looked like maybe Lisa and maybe Rebecca wanted to share a few things. So I just wanted to give the space back over to the two of you.
I'm gonna be really, really quick. A lot of things, some things that the Arts Council has been doing is fiscal sponsorship. As you know, a lot of funding goes to nonprofit organizations. It doesn't go to the individual artists. So how do we equal the playing field for someone who is an artist or, you know, has created themselves as an LLC? All right, fiscal sponsorship. You can use our tax ID number to now be fiscally sponsored to be able to get those funds to continue to do the work. Grant application processes. We know that grants, there can be 45-page grants that, you know, people will be like, listen, I'm not even gonna deal with this. Where bigger organizations can pay someone to do that grant for them. You know, smaller organizations and artists don't have that, you know, they're not privy to that. So making sure that our grant processes are simple. It's literally a Google form. It gets straight to the point. And, you know, even in our application, we ask, is your organization serving BIPOC communities at least by 51%? If you say yes, you get a little bit more money than, you know, any other person that might say no. Those things like that help with, you know, the equal playing field that I discussed before. And we have advisory committees as well. So our Sandbox, which is a free event space, that was curated by our advisory committees of artists, community members that got paid for their work and paid for their time and continually get paid to be on those committees to say, no, as a program director, Rebecca, I'm not feeling that program. That's not going to work. The people say it's not going to work. Okay, no problem. So I take that into consideration. So those are a few other things as well.
And Lisa, you had a counterpoint or a challenging perspective that we would love for you to share.
And maybe I can get to where you were talking about in terms of challenges, right? Because, you know, first I was struck what Shelly said about the budget, and that was clear for me when I came in is what is the story I need to tell with this budget? And what is this budget in front of me telling me? And what it was clear was that the artists that were in our galleries needed to be properly resourced for the work that we were requiring them to do. And that instead of that funding going to, you know, posters and more banners or more flyers or even more things like we wanted, but, you know, we wanted the money to go to the artists to make new work. However, we are a presenting organization. We're not an artist membership organization. We're not a, you know, a different type of thing. What we are is we need to steward that money through the laws of a nonprofit institution and figure out a way to do that. And we can. What I was less prepared for was the education, or lack of a better term at the moment, right, of how to help visual artists understand how those resources are deployed, how, you know, what it means to bring your work into space again, you know, all of the, and those are financial and legal and all of these things, right? And so for me, that has been by far the greatest challenge, is to help young people who I've been extremely inspired by. By the way, I tell people that I became a leader because of Black Lives Matter. I was totally ambivalent about being a leader because all the leaders I saw were doing things that I thought were unethical and I didn't believe in. Right. So here I am. I decide to be a leader. I want to look at how things are resourced. And I'm trying to say to the artists in front of me, well, this is how it was. I'm trying to make it this, and we want to get here. But artists want it to be as professional and as structured as it was previously. So how do you do that when you are trying to look at the structures themselves and say, well, there's a, you know, there are better ways to do that, and some artists don't want them because the audiences need to catch up, right? They want an audience. They want the same kind of audience. They know it, and we all know how to get that audience from structures that we know are oppressive and harmful for work. It's complicated. And how do you do that in this moment? Slowly, I think, through love and joy and education and all of these things, right? But until we, you know, both sides are sort of understanding the language they're speaking, these conversations are challenging. It's like we're talking, you know, Spanish to, you know, Tagalog. It's not the same. And I struggle with telling, you know, I don't want artists to go to business school. And in fact, a lot of the time at my job at Creative Capital, we were thinking about teaching artists to be entrepreneurs. And I will tell you that that is not what most artists want. They're not interested. They want to do their work and have the structure. So how do we balance both?
I just want to amplify something you said around shared language and analysis. I mean, you didn't say it like that specifically, but that's what comes to my mind, is the importance of having some type of shared language. Because if you're not on the same page, then the work is, you're just going in like a circle. Right? And nothing really can get done if we don't have this full ecosystem all moving in alignment together.
That's right.
So what I want to do, y'all, because we are winding down on our time, I'm going to bring back up that question around challenges, and anyone can jump in, but I would like to hear from all of you. What are the challenges, and also what burdens do you carry?
I mean, I think I carry the burden of having, you know, come up and learned and worked in those structures. And as harmful as they were to me, there's only a lot of the ones I know and I default to. So I'm often trying to remind myself to slow down and listen, and make a decision. That time frame is uncomfortable for a lot of people, but I make it necessary for myself. You know.
I think one burden is when you are a Black woman, you know, in these spaces that are predominantly white, it's like, I have something to prove. I have something to prove to my people. I have something to prove to these white spaces, saying that I am here and I'm able to make that change. And it's really difficult. And, you know, you're continually trying to do the work. This is work that, you know, growing up, you felt it, you've endured racism and things like that. So when you get into these spaces, it's like you hit the ground running. Like, I got to do it all. And you have to also give yourself empathy and give yourself time to reset as well. As organizations and as leaders, don't forget that piece about yourself. Setting that 15-minute break in between two meetings, especially now with Zoom, you can go back to back. You can go meetings 3-4 hours straight. So being intentional and doing those type of things as leaders and as organizers, knowing that you have to give yourself grace as well in these spaces. And the work is going to get done. I always talk about the word alignment. Everything that is supposed to happen will happen. And if you have a good heart and you have a true reason as to why you're doing your work, it'll all work out and it'll fall in place.
Rebecca, I'm so grateful that you named the fatigue of holding the, like, I have something to prove, because that is so that is so real. Long Wharf Theater, we just announced this historic transition that we're going to be making, where after 57 years we're going to be leaving our bricks and mortar space over by the food terminal, as a way to really center cultural equity, as a way to really co-create and co-construct with community. We really want to be a theater for everyone. And the challenge, just to go back to your question, Adriane, the challenge is change is hard. Change is really hard for folks. And so to see the way that that's manifesting, to see some of the vitriol, to see some of the critique, letters have been written. People have sent me, phone messages and emails, and sent me, Facebook, direct messages about just, how angry, even so much as saying, like, you're going to fail. This is a terrible idea. But thankfully, I have a network of support. I have an amazing partner in Kit Ingwe as a managing director. I have an amazing board who believe in this vision of making a theater company for everyone. But that's a real challenge, right? When you feel like you are kind of suffocated by the naysayers. And what I say again and again is that the reason that I love the theater is that the stage is a space to hold all of our stories. It is not an and or, it is an and. So to those people who are scared, who are going to miss our home that we've been at for 57 years, I say to them, I hear you, but we will journey together and we will usher in a new chapter, right? So Long Wharf Theater is still your artistic home. It might just look a little bit different. And to those who haven't been coming, who didn't feel welcomed, Long Wharf Theater is your home too. I've been thinking also a lot about just the power of relationships, which is something we've talked about. And y'all, I have to bring in Adriane Marie Brown into this conversation. To those who are listening, please read her books, specifically Emergent Strategy or Holding Change or Pleasure Activism. And one of the things that Adriane says is, she says, let the strength of our movement be measured by the strength of our relationships. So the more that we center relationships, I think we'll be an unstoppable force. I also want to bring into this space a playwright, Virginia Grice. I just spent a couple of days with her at a conference in Boston. And I think it's related to this conversation. She said, I want the rigor of my work to be in the service of my community. And I just think that also, I think, really speaks to the work of cultural equity and the work that we're all collectively trying to do as a community here in New Haven. So those are just some reflections for me.
Shelley or Anthony?
Oh, I'm muted. Hang on.
Oh, sorry. Allison, you let me go first last time, so now you go first.
All right. I feel the fatigue from my colleagues, not for me. I remember when I first learned, sure, yeah, I'm tired, all of that. However, I remember when we were going through some very challenging times at my former organization I worked at around presenting the piece Miss Saigon, which hit in all kinds of wrong ways. It was not a great choice to present, and it hurt people. And I was the organization was in the middle of a lot of conversations and anger and fear. And I sat down with a colleague at one point from outside of the organization and said, God, she said, how are you doing? I said, I'm so tired. She said, you now know this much about what people of color go through every day. And it just stopped me in my tracks. And that was such a turning moment for me as a professional in the arts. And so Adriane, you said you show up in spaces and you bring joy and you have energy, and that is intentional, because I have the privilege of not having to carry what people who are the first have to carry in those spaces. And I see it in my colleagues and I see it in my staff, and it is heavy and it's not fair. And so the thing that I would ask of those of you watching who are of a lighter hue like I am, I would say, please check your microaggressions, check your unconscious bias. They're prisons. They're prisons. And if you are acting from a place of believing that someone's not capable or doesn't have all the skills you think they need, check whether that's coming from a bias. Check whether that's coming from a stereotype, because my guess is that it probably is. The people on this call who are not white work twice as hard as I did to get their jobs. They are twice as prepared as I am, not the other way around. So I just wanted to offer that and say my biggest challenge is waiting for the brilliance to be recognized. But I'm not going to fight until we get there. I'm not going to stop fighting until we get there.
Thank you for that, Shelley. Yeah, I feel that. Because I think it is unfortunate, but it is just the life that we live, being one of very few, doing what we do. I was literally just at the Spring Road Conference with the Broadway League this past week, and really got a chance to see the community that I'm a part of in that world of Broadway and Broadway presenting houses. And basically, I was able to really kind of solidify that much more, that I'm one of 4 Black people that operate a touring presenting house for Broadway entertainment. One of 4. And that's for the entire country. And it's not that there's a whole Latino contingent, an Asian contingent. It's really just the 4 of us. And so it is that burden that we all kind of feel, to make sure that we're doing the best that we believe we can. I say to my friends and my colleagues that it feels nice for me to hear that my other colleagues in the state are hurting right now as well with the shows that they're bringing. I.e., it's not just me. It's not just me doing something wrong somehow, or me not getting it and not being good enough. But we're all feeling that pain because nothing is normal still. So this, even for me, is my first season. It's like, this is not a great season of what's to come, because this is the anomaly. This is just us trying to get back from 0 or negative 100 back to 0 now, to then hopefully begin to increase the next season. So it's a burden, though, that I think all of us just kind of have to get over, though, because we can't live in that either. We get it, we feel it, but to live and stew in that obviously wouldn't be conducive to anything positive. So we press on. We find community within each other. We find community in places and spaces that we can express ourselves openly and freely. Just the burdens that we carry on our shoulders day to day. And hopefully that we also go to a home where it's peaceful, where once again we can kind of woosah and let it out and have positive places to, just be our authentic selves without having to put on a mask any longer. And I also do hope that I create an environment in my job where the diverse folks that work with me hopefully don't have to wear a mask themselves, because they know that Anthony McDonald is who I am, and I'm unapologetic about that. You'll catch me sometimes singing a song in my office. You'll sometimes hear some rap music coming out of my office, and I'll try to make sure that it's not, dropping too many words that, people don't want to hear in an office environment. But at the end of the day, that's just who I am. I love my Hairspray music just as much as I love the Ozzy Brothers. I am who I am, and I'm hoping, and I do hope, I create an environment around me where my team around me feels that they can be their authentic selves without having to hide anything, because they see me being me. Anthony, I won't say my little way, but Anthony McDonald, that guy who grew up in a small town in New Jersey, born to Jamaican parents, who loves his Howard University, who also excelled at Columbia University, and who stands here at the Schubert Theater in New Haven, unapologetically Anthony McDonald. So, I still love what I do, and that's why I'm here, and I wasn't going to let nobody stop me from doing what I do. As long as I had something to say about it, I was going to try to get to this point in my life, and now make space for more folks that look like me to do this work.
So I think we're going to wrap up there with what you said, Anthony. We find community with each other. I think it's a beautiful place to land, because we didn't get a chance to really talk about what partnership looks like for all of us. We didn't really get a chance to explore healing and reconciliation, which I think is we can do a whole session on that, right? Unpacking that. But I am glad that we were able to begin this conversation, and I hope to continue the conversation with you all. It's a pleasure to work with you all. Thank you so much for your time, your commitment, your dedication to the residents of the city of New Haven and beyond. And on that note, I want to thank our audience for tuning in. Please continue to send questions our way. This is one out of a 3-part cultural equity tour series. The next one, and I'm probably should bring Thabisa on, who is our cultural equity coordinator. She can give you specific dates, but the next one is actually going to be more workshop based, and the co-creation team is going to lead that. And then our final one is going to be a concert and a panel conversation with me. So I will be in the hot seat answering all of your burning questions. So Thabisa, do you want to come on and close us out with the dates?
Oh, I'm muted. Sure. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. That this was so informative, and we are just so proud to have folks like yourselves in our city that actually doing the work. Thank you so much for being here. So we have more events coming up, everyone. We have May. May 16th is today, but June 8th, it's going to be at Stetson Library. It's going to be amazing. There's going to be live performance, and there it's going to be a workshop where we'll bring some of the co-creators to show you how to implement these action items into your own lives, as well as just have a community discussion, get you into sharing your own thoughts and ask your questions and just be curious. And then June 14th, we are going to be at State House, where it's going to be about it's just going to be celebration, and we'll bring in a panelist just for a little bit, but enough talking. We want to celebrate ourselves. We want to show you these different artists that we have here in New Haven, and come on through and let's all celebrate together. Hope to see you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
I can't breathe. I can't breathe. I can't breathe. I can't breathe. Simply walking down the street is a mere dream to me. Wearing a hoodie is a sign that I shouldn't exist. I speak my mind with kindness just to be attacked. All of this is true when my color's black. Reaching for my phone makes me a convict. Watching birds in the park creates more fear than a virus threat. In danger of losing my life by staying home to take a nap. All of this is true when my color's black. Dialing 911 is supposed to serve and protect, but instead all I get is a knee to my neck. Told I'm resisting arrest or even shot in the back. All of this is true when my color